He was just a mechanic driving his little girl home through a stormy night. No hero, no agenda. When he saw a woman stranded in the rain, he simply stopped. What he didn't know, the woman he let into his truck was running from a secret powerful enough to pull them both into a storm far worse than the one outside. The rain had no mercy that night. It came down in thick, angry sheets, the kind that made Portland feel like the bottom of a river. Street signs blurred, traffic lights bled red and green across the flooded asphalt. The city, usually loud and restless, had gone quiet, as if even the noise had decided to stay indoors. Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel with both hands and leaned forward slightly, squinting through the windshield that his wipers could barely keep up with. His truck was old, a 2009 Chevy with a heater that worked only when it felt like it, but it moved, and tonight, that was enough. "Dad!" He glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily was bundled in the back seat, her small face half hidden inside a yellow raincoat she'd refused to take off since they left the school recital. She had her nose pressed against the foggy window, breath making little clouds on the glass. "Almost home, Bug," he said. "I know," she paused, "but there's a lady." Ethan looked up. At the far edge of the intersection ahead, just past the broken street lamp that the city had been promising to fix for 3 months, stood a woman. She wasn't holding an umbrella. She wasn't running for cover. She was just standing there in the downpour, one arm raised, waving. Not the casual wave of someone flagging a cab, something more desperate than that. Ethan slowed the truck and pulled to the curb. Through the passenger window, he could see her clearly now. She was somewhere in her early 30s, dark hair plastered flat against her face, wearing a light jacket that had given up fighting the rain a long time ago. No bag, no phone visible, just her, standing in the storm like she'd been dropped there from somewhere else entirely. He rolled down the window. "Hey, you okay?" She stepped closer, and that's when he noticed it. The way her eyes moved, quick, side to side, before they landed on him. Like she was checking something, or someone. "I need a ride," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "Where to?" A pause. Just a second too long. "Anywhere," she said. "Just not home." Ethan stared at her. In 17 years of living in this city, he'd heard a lot of things. That wasn't one of them. He should have said no, he knew that. He was a single father with an 8-year-old in the back seat, driving home at 10:40 on a Tuesday night. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to wish her well and keep moving. But the way she said not home. It wasn't careless, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that lives just below a scream. "Get in," he said. She opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat, pulling it shut quickly. Water dripped off her jacket onto the floor mat. She sat rigid, shoulders tight, staring straight ahead. From the back seat, a small voice. "Hi." The woman turned. Something shifted in her face. The fear didn't leave, but it softened around the edges, just for a moment. "Hi," she said. "I'm Lily. You're really wet." "I am," the woman agreed. "I have a hoodie," Lily announced, already unzipping her backpack with the seriousness of someone solving a very important problem. She produced a small blue hoodie, her backup, the one she kept for cold gymnastics mornings, and held it over the center console. "It might be a little small, but it's warm." The woman took it. Her fingers curled around the fabric slowly, like she hadn't been handed something kind in a while. "Thank you," she said. "I'm Claire." Ethan pulled back onto the road. "Ethan." He didn't ask questions. Not yet. But his eyes went to the rearview mirror twice in the first 3 minutes. Not to check on Lily, to check the road behind them. because Claire was doing the same thing. Every few seconds, her gaze drifted to the side mirror, then back, then to the mirror again. She wasn't watching the rain. She was watching for something, or someone, moving through it. They drove in silence for a stretch, the only sound the drumming of rain on the roof and the tired squeak of the wipers. Then Lily, who had never once in her life been comfortable with silence, said, "Were you lost?" Claire opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at the hoodie in her hands. "A little," she finally said. "Yes." It was the most honest answer she'd given all night. Ethan said nothing. He just drove, away from the flooded intersection, away from the broken street lamp, away from whatever Claire had been standing in that rain running from. He didn't know her story yet.
But he knew one thing, with the quiet certainty of a man who'd spent years reading broken engines and broken people. Whatever she wasn't saying was far worse than anything she was. The diner was called Mel's, and it existed in that particular category of places that never seemed to close, not because it was popular, but because the world always needed somewhere for its insomniacs, its night shift workers, and its people with nowhere else to go. It sat off Route 26, about 12 minutes outside the city, sandwiched between a shuttered auto parts store and an empty lot. A neon sign out front buzzed the word "Open" in faded yellow, one letter flickering like it was thinking about quitting. The parking lot had 4 cars in it, and enough puddles to qualify as a small lake. Ethan had stopped here before, once after a late tow job when he was too tired to cook and too stubborn to order delivery. The coffee was terrible. The pie was outstanding. And nobody asked you anything. Tonight, that last part mattered most. He pulled in and cut the engine. Claire hadn't said a word the entire drive. She'd sat with Lily's hoodie balled in her lap, fingers pressing into it like it was something she needed to hold on to, and watched the mirrors. Ethan had watched her watch them. "Come on," he said simply. Lily was already unbuckling herself with great enthusiasm, unbothered by the hour, unbothered by the rain, running on the pure fuel of childhood curiosity. She grabbed Ethan's hand as they jogged through the downpour toward the entrance. Claire followed a half step behind, head slightly lowered. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and maple syrup and the particular warmth of a place that's been heated by people for decades. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead despite the cold. Booths lined both walls, most of them empty. A man in a flannel shirt sat at the counter with a newspaper. A young woman in scrubs nursed a mug near the window, staring at nothing. A waitress, 60s, silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looked up from behind the counter and smiled the kind of smile that didn't need any reason. "Sit anywhere, hon." Ethan picked the booth farthest from the door, back corner, out of habit. He always sat where he could see the room. He'd learned that from his father, who'd learned it from his, and he'd never once had to explain why. Claire slid in across from him. She chose the side that faced the entrance. They ordered without much discussion. Coffee for Ethan, hot chocolate for Lily, and Claire said, "Whatever's hot," without looking at the menu. The waitress returned with a pot and 2 mugs and a small bowl of creamers without being asked. The quiet efficiency of someone who'd served enough late-night strangers to know what they needed before they did. For a few minutes, nobody said anything of consequence. Lily wrapped both hands around her mug and said the hot chocolate tasted like a hug, which was exactly the kind of thing Lily said. It made Claire smile, a small, brief thing, gone almost before it arrived, like a match lit in wind. Ethan watched Claire without making it obvious. He'd spent 15 years as a mechanic, and the job had taught him how to diagnose things without touching them. The way something sounded, the way it sat, the particular kind of stillness that meant something was about to give. Claire had that stillness, controlled on the surface, barely underneath. Her eyes moved to the door every time it was nudged by wind.
He waited until Lily was occupied. She discovered the jukebox selector mounted to the wall beside the booth and was cycling through song titles with the gravity of a music executive before he spoke. "You don't have to tell me anything," Ethan said quietly. "But I need to know one thing." Claire looked at him.
"Are you in danger right now? Tonight?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her coffee, turned the mug a half rotation, then back.
"Not tonight," she said. "He doesn't know where I am." He. Just one word, and it carried the weight of a whole story. Ethan nodded. He didn't push. "Okay. I just needed to get out," she added, like she owed him an explanation. "I didn't plan it. It was raining and I just walked out, and then I kept walking." "How long were you out there?" "An hour, maybe more." An hour in that rain. No bag, no phone, no plan. That wasn't someone who left because of an argument. That was someone who left because staying had finally become more frightening than everything else. Ethan said none of that aloud. "Is there somewhere I can take you?" he asked. "Family? A friend?" Something moved behind her eyes, a flash of something complicated.
"Not here," she said. "My sister's in Sacramento. My friends are—" She paused. "They know my husband. It's complicated." The way she said, "my husband," flat, almost clinical. The way a doctor names a disease. Lily looked up from the jukebox selector. "Dad, can I play one? I have a quarter." "Knock yourself out, Bug." A few seconds later, a slow Patsy Cline song drifted through the diner, startling the man at the counter, who turned and then smiled to himself and went back to his paper. Claire looked at Lily, this small, bright, unbothered child playing songs in a diner at 11 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday, and something in her expression cracked, just slightly, like a hairline fracture in porcelain. "She's lovely," Claire said. "She's relentless," Ethan said. "But, yeah." Claire looked down again. She turned her mug another half rotation. "I can find a motel. I just need to think for a bit. I'll figure it out." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He thought about what a motel meant. A woman alone, no card, probably no cash, registered under her name, findable. "My couch is free," he said. She looked up quickly. "I've got a spare blanket, a working heater, and a daughter who will absolutely make you pancakes in the morning whether you want them or not." He kept his tone even. "No questions, no pressure. You leave when you want, and I'll drive you wherever that is." Claire stared at him, not with suspicion exactly, more like she was running some kind of internal calculation, weighing a generosity she'd apparently stopped expecting from people. "You don't know me," she said. "No," he agreed, "but you took a hoodie from a kid you'd never met, and you said thank you like you meant it." He shrugged. "That's enough for tonight." The Patsy Cline song ended. Lily slid back into the booth and announced she was hungry and wanted pie, and Ethan flagged down the waitress, and for a little while, the three of them sat in the warm, buzzing light of Mel's diner, while the rain worked itself out against the windows. Claire didn't say yes out loud. She didn't have to. When Ethan stood up to pay the check, she pulled on Lily's little blue hoodie, which was, as promised, slightly too small, and waited by the door. That was answer enough. Ethan was up at 6, the way he always was. Not because an alarm told him to, but because his body had long ago decided that rest was something other people did fully. He moved through the kitchen quietly, the way single parents learn to move, conscious of every creak in the floorboard, every cabinet that closed too hard. He started the coffee, checked Lily's lunchbox, found her left shoe behind the couch, where it had apparently been living for 3 days. Normal morning, ordinary rhythm, except for the woman asleep on his couch.
Claire hadn't moved much in the night. When Ethan had come downstairs at 2 for a glass of water, she'd been curled on her side, still in Lily's hoodie, one hand tucked under her cheek. She'd looked younger asleep, or maybe just less guarded. Like sleep was the only place she could put the weight down. Now she was sitting up, the blanket folded neatly on the armrest beside her, watching the gray morning press itself against the window. She'd heard him in the kitchen. Of course she had. He suspected she wasn't someone who slept deeply anymore. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." He poured 2 mugs and handed her one without ceremony. She took it with both hands, same way Lily held her hot chocolate, and stared into it like it might say something useful. "How'd you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I expected." He nodded and left it there.
Lily came downstairs at 6:45 in her pajamas, with her hair doing something extraordinary on the left side. Announced that she dreamed about a horse that could do math, and then noticed Claire and immediately changed course. "You stayed," she said, as if this were the best possible outcome of any situation. "I stayed," Claire confirmed. Something in her voice was softer this morning, less brittle. "I'm making pancakes," Lily declared, heading to the kitchen with the authority of someone who had definitely made pancakes before, with varying results. "You don't have to," Claire started. "There's no stopping her," Ethan said. "Trust me." It was as close to normal as the morning was going to get, because at 7:15 someone knocked on the front door. Ethan saw them through the narrow window beside the door before he opened it. 2 figures on the porch, rain jackets, one holding a clipboard. His stomach didn't drop, not yet, but it tightened. He opened the door. "Morning," said the first officer. He was broad-shouldered, somewhere in his mid-40s, with the unhurried energy of someone who'd knocked on 1,000 doors and found most of them answered the same way. His name tag read Holt. "Sorry to bother you early. I'm Officer Holt. This is Officer Reyes. We're going door to door in the neighborhood. Routine follow-up on a missing persons report filed last night." Ethan leaned one hand against the doorframe. "Missing persons?" "Yes, sir." Officer Reyes, younger, flipped open a small notepad. "We're looking for a woman named Claire Bennett, 32, dark hair, about 5'5". Her husband reported her missing last night around midnight. Said she left the house after a, and I'm quoting, minor disagreement and didn't come back." The word minor sat in the air between them like something that didn't quite fit the space it was in. Ethan kept his expression neutral. It was a skill he'd developed slowly and without intending to. Not from anything dishonest, but from years of delivering bad news about cars to people who couldn't afford it, of staying calm while things around him weren't. "What'd she look like?" he asked. Reyes turned the notepad around. There was a photo, printed, slightly grainy. Claire, smiling at a camera, dressed nicely, standing in front of what looked like a restaurant. She looked like someone else in it. Or maybe she looked like herself before she'd had reason not to. Ethan studied it for exactly the right amount of time. "I don't think so," he said. "But I was out late last night. What time did she go missing?" "Husband says sometime around 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was driving home around 10, maybe a bit after." He paused. "Didn't see anyone." Holt watched him the way older officers watched people, not with accusation, but with a particular practiced patience, like he was waiting to see if anything shifted. Nothing did. "All right," Holt said. "You live here alone?" "With my daughter." "Anyone else?" Ethan met his eyes. "Just us." Behind him, in the kitchen, he could hear Lily explaining to Claire the precise importance of adding cinnamon to pancake batter. He heard Claire laugh, quiet, surprised, like it caught her off guard. Holt heard it too. His gaze moved briefly past Ethan's shoulder, then came back. "If you see anything, or remember anything from last night,
Reyes said, sliding a card through the gap in the door. "Give us a call." "Will do," Ethan said. He watched them walk back down the path to the sidewalk before he closed the door. He stood in the hallway for a moment, card in hand, and let out a slow breath. When he walked back into the kitchen, Claire was looking at him. She'd heard the voices, even if she hadn't caught every word. She knew. Her face had gone the color of old chalk. "Police?" she asked.
Mark reported me. Last night, midnight. He set the card on the counter. He called it a minor disagreement."
Something moved through Claire's expression. Not surprise. Something quieter than that. The particular lack of surprise that came from having been gaslit so many times that nothing was shocking anymore. "Of course he did," she said. Lily, stirring batter with enormous focus, looked up. "Who's Mark?" "Nobody important," Claire said quickly. Lily accepted this with a nod and went back to her batter. 8-year-olds, Ethan had learned, picked up on far more than they were given credit for, and were also, occasionally, merciful enough to let things go. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down across from Claire. He kept his voice low, steady. "He doesn't know you're here," he said. It wasn't a question. "No." She wrapped her hands around her mug again. "But he'll keep looking. He's—" She stopped, started again. "He doesn't stop. That's the thing people don't understand about him. He doesn't stop." The pancakes hit the plate a minute later, slightly uneven, aggressively cinnamon-scented, arranged in a stack with a confidence that exceeded their quality. Lily set them down between Ethan and Claire with a flourish. "Breakfast is served," she announced. Neither adult moved immediately. They were still looking at each other across the table, a quiet and serious thing passing between them that had no name yet. Then Claire picked up a fork. And Ethan understood, with a clarity that settled in his chest like something cold, that the knock on the door this morning was not the last one. It was only the first. The garage was called Cole & Sons, which had always been a slightly optimistic name given that there was only one Cole and no sons. Just Ethan, a part-time assistant named Des who showed up 4 days out of 5, and a shop cat named Biscuit who contributed nothing but morale. Ethan spent the day underneath other people's cars, which was usually where he did his clearest thinking. Transmissions, coolant lines, exhaust systems, problems with defined answers. You found the fault, you fixed it, you moved on. He appreciated that about machines. They didn't hide what was wrong with them. Not forever, anyway. People were different. He thought about Claire while he worked, about the way she'd looked at the officer's card sitting on the counter. Not with hatred, not even with fear exactly, but with the exhausted recognition of someone who already knew how this game was played, and had already lost a version of it before. He thought about the word minor. He left Des to close up at 5 and drove to Lily's after-school program, where she was waiting outside with a drawing she'd made. A house, a truck, and 3 stick figures in the rain, which she presented to him solemnly. "That's you," she said, pointing to the tallest figure. "That's me, and that's Claire." Ethan looked at it for a moment longer than necessary. "Come on, Bug." Claire was in the kitchen when they got home. She'd cleaned the morning dishes, wiped the counters, and was standing at the stove stirring something that smelled like garlic and tomato. She'd found ingredients in his mostly empty refrigerator and assembled them into something that resembled an actual meal, which was more than Ethan had managed on most weeknights. "You cooked," he said, setting his keys on the hook by the door. "You gave me a couch." She didn't look up from the pot. It seemed fair. Lily dropped her backpack in the hall, announced she was starving, and pulled herself up onto the kitchen counter to watch, apparently satisfied to treat Claire's presence like it was the most natural thing in the world. Children, Ethan thought, were either very wise or completely reckless, sometimes both at the same time. They ate together, Pasta, simple and good, and the conversation stayed easy on the surface. Lily carried most of it, which was typical, reporting on the social politics of third grade with the thoroughness of an investigative journalist. Claire asked questions and listened to the answers with what looked like genuine attention. She was good with Lily, natural, unhurried, like she knew how to be around someone small and trusted without having to think about it. After dinner, after Lily had been bathed and read to and deployed into sleep with the specific military efficiency of a practiced bedtime routine, Ethan came back downstairs to find Claire sitting at the kitchen table, both hands flat on the surface, staring at them. The easy part of the evening was over. He poured 2 glasses of water and sat across from her. He didn't say anything, didn't prompt or press. He'd learned, somewhere in the years of raising Lily alone, that silence held differently depending on who was in it. Sometimes it was emptiness. Sometimes it was a door left open. Claire walked through it. "His name is Mark Bennett," she began. Her voice was even, the flatness of someone who'd rehearsed this and still wasn't ready for it. "We've been married 6 years. He's a project manager at a commercial development firm. Well-liked, well-dressed." A pause. "He coaches Little League on Saturdays." Ethan said nothing. "It didn't start like this," she continued. "It never does, I think." She looked up briefly, then back at her hands. "The first 2 years were fine. Better than fine. He was attentive, thoughtful. I thought that's just what he was." Her jaw tightened. "Turns out attentive and controlling look identical from the inside, until they don't." She told him carefully, in the methodical way of someone who'd spent a long time organizing pain into something survivable. The phone checks, the questions about who she'd seen, who'd texted her, why she'd taken a different route home, the way he'd slowly, without drama, extracted her from her friendships, not through ultimatums, but through small comments, persistent doubts, manufactured conflicts, until the circle of people she could call had become very, very small. Then the circle became just him. "The first time he hit me," she said, "he cried for 40 minutes after, said it would never happen again." She said it without bitterness, like she'd already processed the bitterness, and what remained was just the fact of it. "I believed him. That's the part She stopped. "Anyway." She pushed back her sleeve. Ethan had expected something. He hadn't expected that. The bruising ran from her wrist, up past her elbow, deep purple at the center, yellowing at the edges. Not new, not old. The kind that came from a hand gripping too hard and not letting go. He looked at it. He kept his face still because he had to. "I kept it hidden," she said, pulling the sleeve back down. "Long sleeves, good concealer. He'd apologize and buy me things, and I'd tell myself it was getting better." Her voice dropped. "And then it would get worse. And then he'd apologize and buy me things again. Why didn't you report it?" She looked at him, not resentfully. It was a fair question, and she'd clearly asked it of herself many times. "Because he plays golf with 2 city councilmen," she said. "Because the deputy DA's wife went to college with him. Because when I tried to talk to someone, a friend, before I had none left, Mark found out within a week and told me everything that would happen to my life if I made accusations. And I believed him." She exhaled slowly. "He's not just controlling at home. He's built a wall around himself everywhere else, brick by brick, for years." The kitchen was very quiet. Ethan turned his glass on the table. He thought about the officers that morning, their clipped courtesy, the photo of Claire smiling, the word minor. He thought about Mark Bennett filing that report at midnight, not out of worry, out of ownership. "The night you walked out," Ethan said. "What happened?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "He grabbed my arm," she said. "Same one. And I looked at him, really looked at him, and something just... She shook her head slowly. I stopped being afraid of leaving. I just became more afraid of staying. Ethan nodded. He understood that kind of math. I don't want to make trouble for you, Claire said. Or for Lily. You should know that. I know that. I just didn't have anywhere. I know that too. She looked at him then, and something in her face shifted. Not relief, not yet, but the early shape of it. Like a room where someone had finally cracked a window. Ethan sat with the weight of what she'd told him. He thought about his daughter asleep upstairs, her drawing of 3 stick figures standing in the rain. He thought about the word anywhere, just not home. He understood it now, completely and fully, and in a way that made going back to his ordinary life feel very far away. 2 days passed. They had a rhythm now, the 3 of them, loose and unspoken, the kind that forms between people who are trying to be careful with each other. Ethan went to work, Lily went to school. Claire stayed inside, off her phone, off anything that could be traced, and existed in the quiet of a house that wasn't hers, with a patience that spoke of someone practiced in the art of waiting. She helped where she could, folded laundry, fixed a kitchen drawer that had been sticking for months. Lily came home each afternoon and debriefed her on the day's events the way she debriefed Ethan, with the same depth and the same complete disregard for which parts were important. Claire listened to all of it like it mattered equally, which Lily, to her credit, clearly appreciated. It was almost manageable. Almost. It was Des who noticed first. Des Torres was 26, owned 3 snapback hats which he rotated with great seriousness, and had the specific gift of noticing things he wasn't supposed to while appearing to pay attention to nothing at all. He was under the hood of a Ford Transit on Wednesday afternoon when he straightened up and called across the garage without looking at Ethan. "That SUV's back." Ethan looked up from the invoice he was marking. "What SUV?" "Black one. Parks on the corner of Aldridge, engine running. Was there yesterday when I came in. There again this morning when I opened up." Des wiped his hands on a rag, still not making it seem like a big deal. "Was gone by noon. It's back now." Ethan set the invoice down. He walked to the garage entrance, a wide roll-up door that opened onto the street, and looked without stepping out. Down the block, at the corner, sat a black Chevy Suburban. Tinted windows, engine idling, no parking stickers. Not a car he recognized. It could have been nothing. Portland had plenty of black SUVs. But the idling bothered him. And the fact that it had been there 2 days bothered him more. "You seen the driver?" Ethan asked. "Nope." Des went back to the Transit. "But whoever it is, they're not picking anyone up." Ethan watched the vehicle for another minute. Then he went back inside and finished the invoice without saying anything else. But he took a longer route home that evening, and he checked his mirrors the whole way. The neighborhood canvass started on Thursday. Ethan learned about it from his neighbor, Patrice, a retired school teacher who knew everything that happened on their street before it happened and was constitutionally incapable of not sharing it. She caught him in the driveway that morning, arms folded, chin tilted toward the far end of the block. "Man's been going door to door," she said. "Nicely dressed. Says his wife is missing, shows a photo, asks if anyone's seen her. Very polite about it." She paused, studying Ethan's face. Very polite. The way she said "very polite" carried its own particular weight. "When?" "Yesterday evening. Started from the Kellerman end. Got to the Wens before dark." She paused again. "Didn't make it this far yet." Ethan nodded slowly. "Thanks, Patrice." She held his gaze a beat longer than the conversation required. "Everything okay?" "Always," he said, and he went inside. He told Claire that evening, straightforwardly and without softening it. She deserved the unvarnished version. She'd been living in the varnished version of things for 6 years, and it had nearly destroyed her. She took it quietly. She was standing at the living room window when he told her, looking out at the street through a narrow gap in the curtains, a habit she'd developed, checking the outside world before it could check her. And when he finished, she simply closed the curtain the rest of the way. "He's methodical," she said. "He would have started from the place he last knew I was, worked outward." She turned. "He'll get here." "Not today." "No, but soon." A silence opened up between them. Not uncomfortable, but serious. The kind of silence that precedes a decision. Then, from upstairs, came the sound of Lily's voice, singing something tuneless and enthusiastic to herself, the way she did when she thought no one could hear. Both of them looked up at the ceiling at the same time, involuntarily. It was Claire who spoke first. "I should go," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't entirely. "I've already put you in a position you shouldn't be in. If Mark finds out you lied to the police—" "I didn't lie," Ethan said. "I said I didn't see anyone. I was driving. Technically accurate." Claire looked at him. "Ethan." "I know," he said. He didn't argue the point further. They both knew what it was. She sat on the edge of the couch. "I don't have money. I don't have my cards. They're joint accounts. He'd see it immediately. My phone is at home, which means the one I'm using—" She held up the basic prepaid he'd picked up for her at a gas station. "This is it. It's enough for now. It's not a plan." "Not yet," he agreed. "But it's not nothing." He sat in the armchair across from her, the same one he sat in every night, the one with the worn right armrest from years of sitting exactly the same way, and thought carefully. Then Lily came downstairs. She appeared at the bottom of the steps in her pajamas, dinosaur print, slightly too short in the legs, holding a book she'd already read 3 times and would apparently read 3 more. She looked at Ethan. She looked at Claire. She looked at the specific quality of silence in the room that even an 8-year-old could read as something serious. "Is Claire leaving?" she asked. The directness of children. No preamble, no softening. Claire opened her mouth. Ethan watched her. "I might need to," Claire said carefully, "to keep you guys safe." Lily considered this with the gravity she gave all important things. Then she walked across the room, climbed up onto the couch beside Claire, and leaned into her side with the full, uncomplicated confidence of a child who'd made a decision. "You're safer here," she said simply, "because there's 2 of us." Claire didn't speak for a moment. She looked down at this small, certain person pressed against her arm, and something crossed her face that Ethan had no clean word for. Too large for gratitude, too specific for love, somewhere between the two in a place that didn't have a name yet. Her jaw tightened, her eyes went bright. She didn't cry, but it was close. Ethan cleared his throat. "Okay," he said. "Then we figure it out." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in over a year. A man named Roy Acosta, who'd brought him a rusted '67 Mustang 2 summers ago and spent 4 weeks in the garage talking while Ethan worked. A man who, somewhere in those 4 weeks, had mentioned almost in passing that he now worked with a legal aid organization in the city. Ethan had stored the number without knowing why. Now he knew why. He pressed call. It rang twice before Roy picked up. "Roy," Ethan said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep it quiet." Outside, the street was still, but not empty. Down at the far corner, barely visible through the closed curtains, a car sat with its engine running and its lights off, waiting. Roy Acosta arrived the next morning in a gray Honda that had seen better decades, wearing a corduroy jacket and carrying a paper coffee cup that he held like it was keeping him alive. He was 53, compact, with close-cropped silver hair and the particular unhurried calm of someone who'd spent years in rooms where people were frightened and had learned that urgency, however warranted, rarely helped anyone think clearly. Ethan met him at the door before he could knock. "Lily's at school?" Roy asked quietly as he stepped inside. "Dropped her 20 minutes ago." Roy nodded and followed him to the kitchen, where Claire was already sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a mug. She'd slept badly, Ethan could tell. There were shadows under her eyes and a tightness to her jaw that hadn't fully released even now, in the daylight, in a locked house. Roy sat down across from her, set his coffee cup aside, and folded his hands on the table. "I'm not an attorney," he said, before anything else. "I want to be clear about that. I work with a legal aid group. We connect people to resources, to lawyers who do pro bono work, to shelters and safety networks. What I can offer you is a pathway. What I can't offer you is a guarantee." He paused. "But I've walked a lot of people down this pathway. It works more often than it doesn't." Claire looked at him steadily. "What do you need from me?" Roy appreciated that. Ethan could see it in the slight shift of his posture. He'd expected hesitation or fear, or the long wind-up of someone who'd spent years being told their perspective didn't matter. Instead, he got directness. Claire Bennett, whatever else had happened to her, had not lost her spine. "I need to understand your situation," Roy said. "All of it. Then we figure out what's possible." So Claire told him. The same story she'd told Ethan, but more organized this time, more detailed. Names, dates, incidents. The golf game with the councilman, the deputy DA connection, the joint accounts, the monitored devices, the way Mark had spent 6 years quietly building a fortress of social credibility around himself while systematically dismantling hers. Roy listened without interrupting. He took no notes, which Ethan initially found strange, then understood. Notes could be found. He was filing it all internally, sorting it into the categories he needed. When Claire finished, Roy was quiet for a moment. "The shelter network we work with operates out of Seattle," he said. "It's a coordinated program. Secure housing, legal advocacy, case management. They take women from out of state regularly, and they're careful about it. No names in public records, no digital trail that leads backward." He looked at Claire. "They could have a placement ready within 48 hours if we initiate it today." Claire nodded slowly. "And the legal side?" "That's where it gets more complicated." Roy turned his cup on the table. "Your husband's connections make a standard complaint risky. If it gets to the wrong desk, it gets managed before it can move. What you need, what makes this bulletproof enough that it can't be quietly buried, is evidence. Not just your testimony. Documentation." "What kind of documentation?" "Medical records, if there are any. Photographs, communications, texts, voicemails, emails, where he makes threats or admits to behavior. Anything that corroborates what you've told me." He met her eyes. "Is there anything like that?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "There's a flash drive," she said. "At the house. In my studio, I used to paint. I had a small room for it. I kept a drive in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. Photos I took of the bruises. Screenshots of texts he sent that he later deleted from my phone. I forwarded them to an email account he doesn't know about and printed them. I put everything I could onto that drive." She paused. "I started doing it 8 months ago, when I first started thinking about leaving." Roy and Ethan looked at each other across the table. "You've been planning this," Ethan said. Not an accusation. Something closer to quiet admiration. "Hoping," Claire corrected. "There's a difference." Roy leaned forward slightly. "That drive is significant. Combined with medical documentation, even from a shelter's intake examination. And we have the foundation for an emergency protective order, Something substantial enough that the right judge can't ignore it, regardless of who Mark plays golf with. He paused. But we need the drive, Claire. I know. Is there a window? A time Mark is reliably out of the house? Claire thought about it. Thursdays. He has a standing dinner with clients, leaves at 6, never back before 10. It's been the same for 2 years. She glanced at the small calendar on Ethan's wall. Today was Tuesday. Day after tomorrow. That gives us 48 hours to get the shelter placement confirmed and a lawyer briefed, Roy said. If you go Thursday evening, you get the drive, you're out before he returns, and you leave for Seattle that same night. He looked at her. Would you be able to do that? Go back into that house? A silence. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. Claire's eyes went to the window automatically before she caught herself and brought them back. Yes, she said. You shouldn't go alone, Ethan said. Both Claire and Roy looked at him. He'd said it simply, without drama, the way he said most things, as though it were just a fact of the situation that needed stating. It's a residential neighborhood, Claire said. If someone sees you... If something goes wrong and you're alone in that house, Ethan said, there's no one to get you out. He kept his voice even. I know how to be quiet, and I know how to move fast. That's enough. Claire opened her mouth, closed it. Roy studied Ethan for a moment with an expression that was difficult to read. It wasn't approval exactly, but it wasn't objection either. More like recalibration. The goal is clean and fast, Roy said finally. In, retrieve the drive and any physical documents. Out. 30 minutes maximum. Mark's dinner reservation is for 6. Even if he leaves late, you have a margin. He looked at Claire. Where in the studio is the book? 3rd shelf from the bottom, left side. Red cover, title is The History of Color, which he never would have touched. Something flickered in her expression, dark, briefly, and then gone. He had no interest in anything that was mine. Roy nodded. He stood, picked up his coffee cup, and looked between them. I'll make the calls today. By tomorrow evening, you'll have a confirmed placement and a lawyer who knows what to expect. He buttoned his jacket. In the meantime, keep the curtains closed. Don't let Claire near any window that faces the street. And if that SUV shows up near the garage again... I'll move her, Ethan said. Roy gave a single nod, the small, precise movement of a man who'd given all the instructions he had and trusted the people receiving them. At the door, he paused and looked back at Claire. You did the right thing, he said. Starting that drive 8 months ago. That was clear thinking, under very difficult circumstances. He said it without sentiment, just as information. Hold on to that. He left. The house settled back into its quiet. Claire stared at the table. Ethan refilled both their mugs without being asked and sat back down, and for a while they just existed in the same room with the weight of what Thursday night was going to require. You don't have to come, Claire said finally. I know, he said. Then why? He looked at her. Because Lily made you pancakes, and you stayed and finished them even though you weren't hungry. He paused. And because nobody should have to go back into a place that hurt them alone. Claire said nothing, but she stopped arguing, and that, for now, was enough. Thursday arrived the way bad days often do, quietly, without announcement, wearing the ordinary face of any other morning. Ethan dropped Lily at school, came back, opened the garage, worked through 3 jobs with his hands while his mind stayed elsewhere. Des noticed. He always noticed, but said nothing beyond sliding a coffee onto the workbench around noon and disappearing back under a Subaru without comment. Sometimes the best thing a person could do for you was stay nearby and not ask. By 4 o'clock, Ethan had locked up the garage 2 hours early. By 5, he and Claire were sitting in his truck 2 blocks from her house. The neighborhood was exactly what Mark Bennett would have chosen. Wide streets, trimmed hedges, houses spaced far enough apart that you could scream and the neighbors might not hear, or might decide they hadn't. The kind of street that looked like safety from the outside and was nobody's business from the inside. Claire's house was a two-story colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac. Cream exterior, black shutters, a porch light that came on at dusk on a timer. Perfectly maintained. It looked like a photograph of a home rather than an actual one. "His car's gone," Claire said. Ethan had already confirmed it. He'd driven past once, slow, before parking. No black Mercedes in the driveway. Garage door down, but no light under it. "Roy said the reservation was 6 o'clock, Ethan said. "It's 5:40. We have time." Claire was looking at the house with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not fear. She'd worn fear in various forms for days now, and he knew its shape on her face. This was something older. The complicated grief of someone looking at a place that was supposed to mean something good, and discovering it never really had. "Ready?" he asked. She pulled her gaze from the window. "Yes." They went in through the back. Claire had her key, a fact which struck Ethan as quietly significant, that she'd left in nothing but the clothes on her back, but had kept her house key, as though some part of her had already known she might need to come back for the things that mattered. The rear garden gate opened silently. Good hinges. Mark Bennett, Ethan thought, probably oiled everything in his life that he could control and raged at everything he couldn't. The back door opened into the kitchen. Ethan stepped inside and stopped. The kitchen was immaculate. Not clean the way a lived-in home got clean, but the aggressive tidiness of a space that was maintained rather than inhabited. Every surface bare, every cabinet flush. A fruit bowl on the counter with 3 identical green apples arranged in a triangle. It felt less like a home and more like a stage set. Claire moved past him without pausing, already navigating on memory and urgency. He followed. The studio was on the 2nd floor, a small room at the end of the hallway that still smelled faintly of linseed oil and dried paint. A canvas leaned against one wall, half-finished, a landscape of something coastal. There was dust on the windowsill. It hadn't been used in a while. But the bookshelf was exactly as she'd described. Ethan held his phone's flashlight low, while Claire ran her fingers along the spines. 3rd shelf, left side, until she found the red cover. The History of Color. She pulled it out. The pages had been hollowed with a precision that must have taken hours. Careful, patient, secret work. Inside, a flash drive, a folded envelope thick with papers, and a small SD card held in a Ziploc bag. She exhaled. "Got it," she whispered. She tucked the book under her arm and turned, and stopped. On the desk in the corner, something Ethan hadn't clocked immediately. A small device, cylindrical, dark, positioned to face the room. A baby monitor-style camera, lens catching the faint light from outside. Claire saw it at the same moment. "He put one in here," she said very quietly, like it was the specific violation that broke something loose inside her. "This was the one room." "It might not be live," Ethan said. "It's live," she said. "Everything in this house is live." She wasn't wrong. As they moved back through the hallway, Ethan noticed what he'd missed going in. The small hub mounted near the ceiling at the staircase top, the discreet sensor beside the master bedroom door, the slight, almost imperceptible angle of the hallway smoke detector that pointed down rather than up. Not a home, a surveillance system with furniture in it. They were moving fast now, back down the stairs, back through the kitchen, when Ethan's hand went out and stopped Claire at the foot of the stairs. Headlights. Through the frosted glass panel beside the front door, twin beams swung across the hallway wall as a car turned into the cul-de-sac. They both went still. The lights didn't pass. They slowed. They stopped. A car door opened and closed. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her back through the kitchen toward the rear door. But before they reached it, the front door opened. Mark Bennett was not what Ethan had constructed in his mind. He'd imagined something obvious. Size, aggression worn on the surface. But the man who stepped into the hallway was lean and composed, dressed in a charcoal suit, tie loosened just once at the collar. Handsome in a forgettable way. He moved through his own front door with the unhurried ownership of a man who'd never once doubted that everything in his sightline belonged to him. He saw them immediately. The three of them stood in a kitchen that felt suddenly very small. A moment passed, a particular suspended kind of moment, where the air in the room seems to make a decision. Then Mark smiled. It didn't reach anything above his mouth. "Claire?" His voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice of a man used to being the calmest person in any crisis he'd personally created. "I had a feeling." Claire had gone rigid beside Ethan, not frozen, rigid. The stillness of someone who knew exactly what this version of Mark preceded. Mark's eyes moved to Ethan.
He looked at him the way a man looks at a problem he's already begun solving. "And you are?" he said.
"Nobody important," Ethan said. Something shifted behind Mark's eyes at that. The pleasantness thinned. "You've been keeping my wife in your home," Mark said. Not a question. Still calm, but the calm had edges now. "You lied to the police. You've interfered in a private family matter." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you understand what that means for you?" "I understand what those bruises on her arm mean," Ethan said. "That's enough." The smile left entirely. What replaced it was something Ethan recognized. He'd seen it in engines that had been running wrong for too long, past the point of warning signals, into the territory of something about to break. Mark took one step forward, and the composed project manager with the golf buddies and the dinner reservations was simply gone, dropped like a coat, revealing something colder and uglier underneath. "You're going to step aside," Mark said, his voice dropping to something quiet and very deliberate. "And she is going to stay. And you are going to go back to whatever—" "We're leaving," Ethan said. He put himself between Mark and Claire and moved, not fast enough to provoke, but steady and committed, the way you moved toward a door when you'd already decided the conversation was over. Claire moved with him, the book pressed to her chest, the flash drive inside it. Mark grabbed for Claire's arm. Ethan caught his wrist. For a moment, the two men held that position. Ethan's grip on Mark's wrist, Mark's face 2 feet from his. The mask entirely gone now, something furious and exposed in its place. "Last time," Ethan said quietly, "we're leaving." Mark released, not from fear, from the calculation of a man who understood when a public move would cost him more than a private one. They went out the back door. Ethan didn't run. He walked fast and deliberately, hand at Claire's back, through the garden gate, down the alley behind the houses, not stopping, not looking back, until they reached the truck. Claire got in. He started the engine. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. Then Claire looked down at the book in her hands. Still there. Still whole. "He came back early," she said. "He knew," Ethan said. "The cameras." She absorbed this. "It doesn't matter," she said, and her voice, despite everything, was steadier than it had any right to be. "We got it." Ethan pulled onto the main road and drove. Behind them, in the cul-de-sac, a light came on in the upstairs window of the cream Colonial. And stayed on. Ethan drove without a destination for the first 10 minutes, not aimlessly, deliberately. A left, a right, doubling back through side streets, watching the mirrors with the focused quiet of someone who'd learned tonight that the threat they were dealing with was not impulsive. Mark Bennett didn't chase,
he calculated, which meant if he was going to follow them, he'd do it carefully, and carefully was exactly what Ethan was looking for. Nothing followed. He pulled into the parking lot of a closed hardware store 4 miles from the neighborhood, cut the lights, and let the engine idle. Claire hadn't spoken. She was holding the hollowed book against her chest with both arms, the way Lily held things she was afraid of losing. Her breathing had steadied during the drive. Ethan had been monitoring it peripherally, the way he monitored everything, quietly, without making it a thing. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." A pause. "No." Another pause. "Both." "That's about right." He pulled out his phone and called Roy. It rang once. "Tell me," Roy said, no preamble.
"We got the drive, the documents. We ran into a complication." A beat of silence. "Mark?" "He came back early. There were cameras throughout the house. He saw us on them. We got out before anything physical escalated, but he knows she's been somewhere local. He knows she had help." Roy was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Ethan had come to understand that Roy's silences were not hesitation, they were processing. When Roy went quiet, something was being built. "How long ago did you leave the house?" 15 minutes. "Is the drive intact?" "Yes." "Then we move tonight." Roy's voice shifted, still calm, but operating at a different register now, the register of someone switching from planning to execution. "I've already spoken to the attorney. Her name is Sandra Vale. She's been briefed on the basics. She's been waiting for this call. I'm going to conference her in. Don't move from wherever you are." The call clicked and expanded. A woman's voice entered, precise, unhurried, the voice of someone who'd handled crises at 11 o'clock before, and would again. "Mr. Cole," Sandra Vale said, "Roy tells me you have documentation." "Flash drive, printed screenshots, photographs of injuries, and Claire herself, who can testify." "That's enough to file for an emergency protective order tonight. I have a judge I can reach. She handles emergency family law matters, and she has no connection to any of the names Claire mentioned." A brief pause. "I need Claire to confirm one thing for me. The bruising. Is it current? Visible?" Ethan looked at Claire. She'd heard. She pulled back her sleeve without being asked, looked at the bruising in the dim light of the parking lot, and nodded. "Current," Ethan said. "Good. I need you to bring her to my office. I'll text Roy the address. We do this tonight, while Mark is still operating under the assumption that he has time to manage this quietly. We do not give him that time." The call ended. Roy texted the address 40 seconds later. Ethan put the truck in drive. Sandra Vale's office was in a low building near the river. No signage on the door, which Ethan understood was probably intentional. Inside, it was warm and spare, the kind of space that communicated competence rather than comfort. Sandra herself matched it. 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses on, a manner that was neither cold nor warm, but something more useful than both, focused. She sat Claire down, offered water, and spent 40 minutes going through everything methodically. The flash drive was examined on a sealed laptop. The documents were reviewed and dated. Claire answered questions with a clarity that Ethan found quietly extraordinary, considering what she'd been through in the last 2 hours, in the last 6 years. She sat in that chair and gave Sandra Vale everything she needed with a precision that spoke of someone who'd been waiting a very long time to be asked the right questions by the right person. At 11:45, Sandra made a call. At 12:30, she set her phone down and looked at Claire. "The emergency protective order has been granted," she said. "It's active as of tonight. Mark Bennett is legally prohibited from contacting you, approaching your location, or attempting to remove or destroy any property connected to this case." She folded her hands. "Additionally, I've been in contact with the department's Family Crimes Unit, a detective who is not connected to any of your husband's associates. She'll want to speak with you tomorrow. The documentation you've provided is being treated as credible and significant." Claire stared at her. Something moved across her face that Ethan had no name for. Too enormous for the room, really. 6 years of being told she was invisible, that she had no case, no recourse, no voice that anyone with power would listen to. And now, a judge had signed a piece of paper at midnight that said otherwise. She didn't cry. She pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and came back. "What about the shelter?" she asked. "Roy has confirmed placement," Sandra said. "Seattle as discussed. A caseworker will meet you at the intake location tomorrow afternoon. From that point, you'll be under their program. New documentation, secured address, legal advocacy that continues independently." She paused. "You'll need to leave Portland in the morning, Claire, before Mark's attorney files any countermeasures and before he has time to reframe this narrative to anyone who might listen." Claire nodded. She understood the timeline. Ethan drove her back to his house just after 1 in the morning. The street was quiet. The corner where the black SUV had sat was empty. Whatever Mark was doing tonight, he was doing it through lawyers now, which meant the danger had shifted shape, become more formal, but no less real. They didn't sleep much. Claire sat at the kitchen table and wrote, longhand, in a notebook Ethan found in a drawer, a detailed account of every incident she could remember, with dates and descriptions, organized and signed. Additional documentation for Sandra. She wrote for 2 hours with the focused intensity of someone completing something they'd been composing in their head for a very long time. Ethan sat in the living room. He wasn't keeping watch, exactly. He just wasn't able to be in another room. Around 3, Claire appeared in the doorway, notebook finished, and looked at him. "You should sleep," she said. "So should you." She almost smiled. "I'll sleep in Seattle." He nodded. She went back to the kitchen, and he heard the quiet scratch of pen on paper start up again. Lily woke at 6 and came downstairs to find both of them in the kitchen. Ethan with coffee, Claire with the notebook closed in front of her. A stillness about her that was different from the stillness of fear. Calmer. Like something had shifted in the night and settled. Lily looked at the two of them with her particular, perceptive 8-year-old gravity. "Something happened," she said. It wasn't a question. "Claire has to go today," Ethan said. "To somewhere safe, where she'll get help." Lily absorbed this. She pulled out her chair and sat down and was quiet for a moment, in the way that meant she was processing, not ignoring. Then she looked at Claire. "The bad person. Is he going to come here?" "No," Claire said. It was the first time she'd said that word about Mark with actual certainty underneath it. "He's not allowed to." Lily nodded slowly, satisfied with the mechanics of this, if not entirely with the outcome. After breakfast, while Ethan loaded Claire's few things into the truck, the notebook, the documents, the clothes that Patrice from next door had quietly appeared with 2 days ago, slightly too large, absolutely not commented on, Lily stood in the hallway and watched. Then she went upstairs and came back down holding something. The blue hoodie. The small one she'd handed over the center console on a rainy Tuesday night to a woman she'd never met. She held it out to Claire. "Keep it," she said, "so you have something warm." Claire took it. She held it for a long moment and looked at this child who had, from the very first night, treated her not as a problem to be managed or a stranger to be cautious of, but simply as someone who needed warmth. She crouched down and hugged Lily. Properly.
the way adults hugged children when words had run out. Lily hugged back with both arms, the complete physical commitment of someone who meant it entirely. Then Ethan drove Claire to the meeting point Roy had arranged. He watched her walk through the door, and then he drove home to make Lily's lunch and get her to school on time, because the world continued, as it always did, in both its tragedy and its ordinary grace, simultaneously and without apology.
3 weeks passed. Portland moved into the deeper end of autumn, the kind that stripped the trees bare and left the streets carpeted in wet leaves that nobody got around to clearing, the city too busy and too gray to bother. The rain returned in its usual form, steady and unremarkable, the kind Portlanders walked through without umbrellas because eventually you stopped fighting the weather and simply became part of it. Ethan opened the garage at 7 each morning. He fixed things. He drank bad coffee. He picked Lily up at 3:15 and made dinner and helped with homework and did all the ordinary things that ordinary life required. And if there were moments, standing at the kitchen sink or driving a route he'd taken before, where the past 3 weeks pressed in with a particular weight, he allowed it briefly, and then let it pass. He was good at that, had always been good at that. What he hadn't expected was Lily. She didn't talk about Claire immediately. That wasn't her way. Lily processed things the way she processed most things of significance, which was slowly and then all at once, usually at an inconvenient moment. It happened on a Wednesday evening, 2.5 weeks after Claire had left. Ethan was at the stove making soup. Nothing impressive, canned tomato with bread, a low-effort dinner he cycled in whenever the week had been long, and Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework, or performing the general shape of doing homework, while mostly staring at the middle distance. "Dad," she said. "Hmm? Do you think Claire's okay?" He stirred the pot. "I think she's getting there." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Getting there isn't the same as okay." He turned from the stove and looked at his daughter, this child who had, without anyone teaching her, understood from the very first night that a woman standing in the rain needed a hoodie and a kind word before she needed anything else. "No," he agreed, "but it's the right direction." Lily considered this with her chin in her hand. "I kept thinking about her," she said. "At school, whether she was safe." "Me too." She looked at him. "Were you scared? When you went to her house?" He thought about the cream colonial, the surveillance cameras angled down from the hallway ceiling, the moment Mark Bennett had walked through his own front door, and the air in the room had made its decision. "A little," he said. "Yes." Lily nodded, satisfied with the honesty of this. "That's okay," she said. "Being scared and doing it anyway is the brave one." He stared at her for a second. "Where'd you hear that?" "I made it up." She went back to her homework with the casual confidence of someone who just said something true and knew it. Ethan turned back to the stove. He was smiling, but he didn't let her see. The letter arrived on a Friday. It was a plain envelope, no return address, postmarked Seattle. Inside was a single folded page, handwritten, neat, the pen pressed firmly into the paper like the words needed anchoring. Ethan read it, standing in the hallway, still in his work jacket, grease on his knuckles from the morning's first job. "Ethan, I've been trying to write this for 2 weeks and kept starting over because nothing felt adequate. So I'm going to stop trying to make it adequate and just say it plainly, because I think that's the kind of communication you'd prefer anyway. I'm safe. That's the first thing and the most important thing. The shelter here is run by people who understand, not just procedurally, but actually. I have a room, I have a caseworker named Diane who is quietly formidable, and I have a lawyer continuing Sandra's work who tells me the evidence we gathered has made the case considerably harder for Mark to dismiss. There will be a process. It will take time. But it has begun. and it has begun in a way that can't be easily undone by someone with the right connections and a rehearsed story. His attorney filed a counterpetition the morning after I left Portland. I expected that. What I didn't expect was that the detective assigned to the case, the one Sandra chose, had handled 2 other cases connected to men in Mark's social circle over the past 4 years. Cases that had been quietly deprioritized. She is, according to Diane, very motivated. I have been thinking about the night you stopped. I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. Not the fear of it, or the rain, or the strangeness of getting into a truck with a man and his daughter at 11 o'clock and having nowhere specific to ask to go. I've been thinking about the fact that you didn't ask me to explain myself before you let me in. You just drove. 6 years of someone telling you that you don't make sense, that you're dramatic, that no one would believe you. It makes you forget that some people take you at your word, that some people see a woman standing in the rain and simply see someone who needs to get out of it. You saw that. Lily saw it before you did, I think. Please tell her that her hoodie has been very useful. I wore it on my first night here, and I've kept it on the chair beside my bed since. It's a small thing. It doesn't sound like much. But some nights, the small things are the ones that remind you that kindness exists in the same world as everything else. And that matters more than I can properly explain. I'm going to be okay. I believe that now, in a way I didn't 3 weeks ago. It's not confidence, exactly. It's more like the decision to keep walking in a direction even when you can't see where it ends. Thank you for the couch. Thank you for the diner. Thank you for going back to that house with me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for believing me. Claire. Ethan stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then he folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the kitchen counter where Lily would see it when she came home. She read it at the kitchen table while he made dinner. He didn't watch her read it, gave her the privacy of it, the way you gave a person space with something that belonged to them. When he turned from the counter, Lily had the letter folded in her lap and was looking at the middle distance with the expression she wore when she was organizing something large into something she could hold. "She's okay," Lily said. "Getting there," Ethan said. And then, because Lily deserved the better answer, "Yeah, she's okay." Lily nodded. She folded the letter once more along its existing creases, walked down the hall, and came back without it. "I put it in my room," she said simply, "with the hoodie." Ethan looked at her. "So I remember," she added, as though this required no further explanation. It didn't. That night, after dinner, after homework and bath and the protracted negotiation of bedtime that never seemed to get shorter, regardless of how many times they did it, Ethan sat in the armchair with the worn right armrest and looked at the couch. 3 weeks ago, a woman he'd never met had sat there, holding a small blue hoodie, watching the door, shaking in ways she was trying not to let show, carrying 6 years of something heavy enough to drive a person out into a rainstorm with no bag, no plan, and nothing except the need to be anywhere else. He thought about what it cost to stay in a place that was destroying you. He thought about what it cost to leave. He thought about Lily, 8 years old, handing her hoodie over a center console in the rain with the complete moral clarity of someone who hadn't yet learned to overthink kindness. He thought about the things you didn't know you were capable of until the moment required them. And then he stopped thinking about it, tucked it away in the part of himself where the important things lived, quiet and permanent, and turned off the lamp and went upstairs to bed. The street outside was still. The rain had stopped, for now. Through the window of Lily's room, just visible in the glow of her nightlight, the small blue hoodie sat folded on her chair. A girl had given it to a stranger. A stranger had worn it, through the worst night of her life.
And now it sat in a child's room in Portland, Oregon.
Not as a souvenir, not as a relic, but as a simple, quiet record of what three people had managed to be for each other during 9 days that none of them would ever fully explain to anyone who hadn't been there. Some stories didn't end. They just found the place where they could breathe.